Have you ever been forced to choose between saving the man you love and keeping the respect of the only family you've ever known? The question hit Hector Ramirez like a backdraft the moment he stepped into the locker room of Chicago Fire Station 22 on a crisp October morning. He was 32, built like the trucks he drove, with dark hair cropped short and a jaw that had taken more than one punch on the job. 8 years with the department, and he still loved the smell of diesel and sweat that greeted him every shift. Today, though, the air felt poisoned. "Ramirez, you bringing your boyfriend to the barbecue this weekend?" Mike Callahan yelled from the next row of lockers, his voice dripping with that fake jock laugh the guys used when they wanted to draw blood without throwing fists. A couple of others chuckled. Derek Ruiz high-fived Mike like they had just scored. Hector kept his face stone still, zipped his turnout pants, and pretended to check his SCBA mask. Inside his chest, something twisted tighter than a hose knot. The rumor had started 3 weeks ago after a late-night call. Someone had spotted him and Paul Thompson in the parking lot behind O'Malley's bar. One quick kiss under the streetlight had been enough. Now the whole house knew, or thought they knew. Paul was in the same unit, same shift, and they had been careful for 2 solid years. Careful had just evaporated. Hector grabbed his helmet and headed for the apparatus floor where the morning inspection waited. Paul was already there, polishing the side mirror of engine 22. Their eyes met for half a second, the same half-second they had shared 1,000 times in private. No words, just the silent promise they had made after the first time they admitted they were in love. "We keep this safe until we can't." The day dragged with small fires and medical runs. Every time Hector came back from a job, the crew's praise had a new edge. "Good save, Ramirez. Too bad you can't high-five your special friend in front of the cameras." Hector smiled through it all the way his father had taught him to smile when the world pushed. But by the time the shift ended, his shoulders ached from more than the gear. He drove straight to Paul's apartment in Logan Square, a third-floor walk-up with a view of the L train. Paul opened the door before Hector could knock, pulled him inside, and locked the deadbolt. They didn't speak at first. Paul just wrapped his arms around him and held on until the tension in Hector's back finally eased. "Rough one?" Paul asked quietly, his blonde hair still damp from the shower. "They're not letting it go," Hector answered, sinking onto the couch. "Mike's getting bolder. Derek's following. I keep thinking about what happens if the captain hears the wrong version." Paul sat beside him, their knees touching the way they always did when the world felt too loud. "We knew this might happen. 2 firefighters in the same house. Sooner or later someone sees." He traced a thumb along Hector's knuckles, the same gentle motion he used after every bad call. "But I'm not sorry we found each other. Are you?" Hector shook his head. He thought about the night they met at the first responder charity gala 2 years earlier. Paul had transferred from a South Side house, and they had ended up at the same table talking about everything from childhood dreams to the best pizza in Chicago. By midnight, they were laughing like old friends. By 1, they were kissing in the shadows of the parking garage. It had felt like oxygen after years of holding his breath. "I just hate lying to the crew," Hector said. "They're supposed to be my brothers. And my parents, you know how that conversation would go." His mother still lit candles for his safety every Sunday. His father still called him Mijo and asked when he was going to meet a nice girl and settle down. The lie had grown so big it had its own heartbeat. They cooked pasta together the way they always did on quiet nights. Paul stirred sauce while Hector set the table. Between bites, they talked about normal things. The new captain's rules, the upcoming union vote, the way the leaves were turning gold along the lakefront. But underneath every sentence lay the same fear. What if the crew turned their backs for real? What if the department found a way to push one of them out? What if love wasn't enough when the world decided 2 men in turnout gear was too much? Later they lay in bed, Paul's head on Hector's chest, listening to the distant rumble of the trains. Hector stared at the ceiling, and the question returned louder than before. "Have you ever been forced to choose?" He closed his eyes and pulled Paul closer. For tonight, the answer could wait. The next shift started with a family call that left everyone quiet. An elderly couple trapped on the 2nd floor of a row house. Hector and Paul went in together the way they had 100 times before, moving like one person. They found the wife unconscious and the husband trying to drag her to the window. Hector carried her down while Paul stayed with the husband, talking him through the smoke until the stretcher arrived. On the ride back to the station, the usual chatter was missing. Even Mike kept his mouth shut. But the silence didn't last. In the locker room, Derek cornered Hector while Paul was still in the shower. Look, man, I don't care who you sleep with, but don't bring it here. This is a firehouse, not a parade. Derek's voice was low, but the words landed like a slap. Hector met his eyes. I've never brought anything but my A game to this job. Same as you. Derek snorted and walked away. That afternoon, Hector drove to his parents' house in Cicero for his mother's birthday. The small brick bungalow smelled of tamales and cinnamon. His father sat in the recliner flipping through channels. Mijo, you look tired. When are you bringing a girl home? Your mother worries. Hector smiled the same practice smile and said he was too busy saving lives to date. Inside, he felt the lie expand until it pressed against his ribs. Later in the kitchen, his mother handed him a plate of leftovers and studied his face. Something's different with you lately. You can tell me anything, you know that, right? For one wild second, Hector almost said it. Almost told her about Paul, the man who made him laugh at 3 in the morning and who held him when nightmares of burning buildings woke him up. Instead, he hugged her and promised he was fine. Back at Paul's that night, they argued for the first time in months. I'm tired of pretending, Paul said, pacing the living room. We're grown men. We risk our lives every shift. Why can't we risk telling the truth? Hector rubbed his temples. Because my dad still calls gay people sinners on Sunday, and the crew already treats me like I'm contagious. One wrong move, and we both lose everything. Paul stopped pacing, sat down, and took Hector's hands. I love you. That's not changing. But I need to know if you're willing to fight for us when the fire gets bigger than the one outside. Hector nodded slowly. I am. I just don't know how yet. They fell asleep tangled together the way they always did when words failed. The following week, a small warehouse fire tested them again. Hector took point on the search. Paul backed him up. Inside, the smoke was thick and visibility zero. They found 2 workers unconscious and dragged them out together. Back at the station, the captain clapped both men on the shoulder. Damn fine work, you two. For a moment, it felt normal. Then Mike muttered just loud enough for Hector to hear. Yeah, real fine teamwork. The crew laughed. The moment shattered. Hector drove home alone that night, the question echoing louder. He wondered how many more shifts he could survive before the choice was forced on him. October turned colder, and the crew's mood hardened. Someone had left a rainbow sticker on Hector's locker with the word Pride crossed out in black marker. He peeled it off without comment. Paul saw it later and his jaw tightened, but he said nothing in front of the others. Their stolen moments grew shorter. A quick hand squeeze in the stairwell, a whispered "stay safe" before every call. Hector's best friend in the house, Tony Morales, had been quiet lately. They had come up through the academy together, shared beers after tough shifts. One afternoon, Tony pulled Hector aside in the gear room. I heard the talk. Is it true? Hector didn't blink. Does it change how I do the job? Tony looked away. It changes how some of the guys see you. And if they see you different, they might hesitate when it counts. I'm just saying, be careful. The warning sat in Hector's stomach like ash. That weekend, Paul suggested they drive to the lakefront just to breathe. They parked near Montrose Beach and walked the path holding hands only when no one was looking. Paul talked about his sister in California who already knew and accepted them. She says we should move west. Start over where nobody knows our names. Hector watched the waves. Chicago is home. My parents are here. The house is here. Paul nodded, but the sadness in his eyes was new. Monday brought another family dinner at his parents' house. This time his younger brother Carlos was there visiting from college. Carlos had always been the loud one, the one who teased Hector about never having a girlfriend. Halfway through dinner, Carlos dropped his fork. I saw you and that blonde guy at the bar last month. Kissing. You gonna explain that? The room went still. Hector's father set his glass down slowly. Mijo. Hector felt the floor tilt. He looked at each face and chose his words like stepping through hot coals. I'm seeing someone. His name is Paul. He's a firefighter too. His mother's eyes filled. His father's face turned to stone. Carlos shook his head. You're really doing this? Hector left before dessert. In the car, he called Paul, voice shaking. They know. My brother saw us. My dad didn't say a word, but I could feel it. Paul met him at the apartment, and they sat on the floor with their backs against the couch. We don't have to figure it all out tonight, Paul whispered. But Hector knew the clock was ticking. The next shift, the tension at the station was thick enough to cut with a Halligan bar. Tony avoided eye contact. Mike made another joke about special training. Hector kept his head down and did his job. When the alarm dropped for a car fire on the expressway, he was first on the rig. Paul rode beside him, their knees touching under the gear. For those few minutes, everything felt right again. Thanksgiving arrived with snow flurries and a heavy heart. Hector's mother called 3 times begging him to come to dinner. He went alone. Paul stayed at his own place, respecting the boundary, even though it hurt both of them. The table was set with all the usual dishes, but the conversation stayed on surface topics: football, the weather. No one mentioned Paul. No one mentioned the word that had dropped like a grenade 2 weeks earlier. After dinner, his father asked Hector to help in the garage. They stood among tools and old tires. "I raised you to be a man," his father said, voice low. "To carry the family name. This thing with another man, it ends the line. It ends everything I worked for." Hector felt the words like a backdraft sucking the air from his lungs. "I still save lives every day, Dad. I still show up. That hasn't changed." His father looked away. "But who you are has." Hector left early. He drove straight to Paul's, and they spent the night talking through every fear. Paul's own parents had been gone for years, but he understood rejection. "We can keep hiding, or we can start living," he said. "I'm ready when you are." Hector nodded, but the station loomed larger every day. The following week, the crew got called to a multi-vehicle pileup on the Kennedy. Hector and Paul worked side by side, cutting people out of wreckage. They moved like partners who had done this in their sleep. On the ride back, Mike finally crossed a line. "You two sure look cozy out there. Maybe you should share a bunk too." The cab went silent. Hector felt Paul tense beside him. Before anyone could speak, the captain's voice crackled over the radio, calling them to another run. The moment passed, but the poison lingered. That night, Hector and Paul argued again, this time about coming out at the station. "If we tell them ourselves, maybe we control the narrative," Paul said. Hector shook his head. "Or we lose everything we've built. The pension, the respect, the brotherhood." They went to bed angry and woke up reaching for each other anyway. Love was still stronger than fear, but the gap was closing. December brought shorter days and longer silences. Hector's mother left voicemails asking him to come for Christmas. He deleted them. At the station, Tony finally spoke again. "I've been thinking. You're still the same guy who dragged me out of that basement fire 2 years ago. I don't care who you love. I've got your back." It was the first crack of light in weeks. Hector thanked him, but knew not everyone felt the same. The call came at 2:17 a.m. on a freezing December night. Warehouse fire, West Side, multiple companies working. Possible collapse. Engine 22 rolled out, lights flashing. Hector and Paul rode in the jump seats, their usual silent communication passing between them. The building was an old furniture factory, flames already licking the roof. The incident commander ordered search and rescue. Hector and Paul were first in. Inside, the smoke was black and thick. They moved room by room, calling out. Paul found 2 workers and sent them back with another team. Hector pushed deeper. Then the floor gave way. Paul's voice crackled over the radio. "I'm trapped, level 2, hallway collapse." Hector's heart slammed against his ribs. The captain ordered everyone out. "Too unstable, Ramirez, evacuate now." Hector ignored the order. He crawled through debris, his thermal camera showing Paul's heat signature 30 feet ahead. Beams groaned above him. He found Paul pinned under a fallen rack, his leg crushed, oxygen mask cracked. "I've got you," Hector said, voice steady, even though terror clawed at his throat. He lifted the metal with every ounce of strength years of training gave him. Paul gasped when the weight lifted. Hector dragged him free, threw him over his shoulder, and started back. The radio exploded with voices. "Ramirez, what the hell are you doing?" Hector kept moving. Flames roared closer. A support column cracked. He felt the building shudder, but he kept Paul tight against his chest the same way he had held him in bed 1,000 quiet nights. When they burst through the exterior wall, the crew was waiting, hoses trained on the exit. Hands reached out. Paul was loaded onto a stretcher. Hector collapsed to his knees, mask off, breathing hard. Over the radio, everyone had heard the last thing he said before the collapse. "I love you, hold on." The words hung in the cold night air. The entire unit stood frozen. No jokes. No side eyes. Just silence and the sound of water hitting flames. At the hospital, Paul woke up in recovery with Hector beside him. "You stupid, brave idiot," Paul whispered, smiling through pain. Hector laughed for the first time in weeks. "Couldn't lose you. Not like that." Outside the room, the crew waited. Mike stood at the front, his face unreadable. The station felt different when Hector returned after 3 days off. The Christmas tree in the day room still blinked, but the usual banter was gone. Captain Morales called everyone to the apparatus floor. Hector stood at attention, expecting the worst. Instead, the captain read from a department citation. For exceptional bravery above and beyond protocol, firefighter Hector Ramirez is awarded the Medal of Valor. His actions saved the life of firefighter Paul Thompson and prevented further loss. The crew clapped, slow at first, then louder. Mike stepped forward, cleared his throat. I was wrong. About a lot of things. You risked everything for one of us. That's what this job is. Derek nodded. Tony slapped Hector on the back. Brother. The word landed soft and real. Later in the locker room, Paul limped in on crutches. He and Hector stood together while the others filed past, offering handshakes and quiet apologies. No one mentioned the word gay. They didn't have to. The silence that once felt poisonous now felt like respect. Hector and Paul drove to the lakefront that evening, the same spot where they had walked months earlier. Snow dusted the path. This time they held hands, openly, the city lights reflecting on the water. We don't have to hide anymore, Paul said. Hector nodded. Not here. Not with them. Christmas at his parents' house was different too. His mother hugged him tight and whispered, "Bring Paul next time." His father still struggled, but he shook Paul's hand and said, "Thank you for watching out for my son." Small steps, but they were forward. Months later, the crew threw a barbecue. Hector and Paul arrived together. Mike flipped burgers and called out, "Ramirez, Thompson, get over here and help." No jokes. Just two names side by side like they belonged. Hector looked around at the faces that had once mocked him and felt the question finally quiet. He had chosen, and the family he feared losing had chosen him back. In the end, Hector and Paul's story shows that the fiercest fires are often the ones we carry inside. Courage isn't only about running into burning buildings, it's about stepping into the truth, even when the people you love most might turn away. The real lesson here is simple, yet hard one. Hiding who you are may keep the peace for a while, but living openly lights a path that can heal old wounds and build stronger bonds than fear ever could. Choose love. Choose bravery. The flames may test you, but they never define you.